You just deleted the only thing keeping your entire empire standing. And you don't even realize it yet. The words hang in the air like a blade ready to drop. All I can hear is the soft hum of the HVAC and the quiet shuffle of 26 people shifting in their seats. Eyes darting between me and the woman standing at the front of the sleek glass conference room. Colleen Brewster, Vice President of Operations at Liberty Point Consulting. Power-suited, calculated, the kind of woman who believes spreadsheets don't lie, and that human emotions are liabilities to be stomped out in the name of efficiency. She's glaring at me as if I'm a virus infecting her perfectly organized system. And moments ago, with one decisive click of her manicured finger, she wiped away every file I'd spent a year building. Just gone. 53 meticulously documented pages of personal insights, client anecdotes, little fragments of humanity that, for me, were the heartbeat keeping our business alive. Colleen saw them as clutter. I see them as the only reason Liberty Point Consulting hasn't bled its client list dry. And the way she's looking at me now, I know she thinks she's won. My name is Madison Drake. I'm 33, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I'd finally figured out how to navigate this brutal, shark-infested world called corporate America. I came to Liberty Point Consulting almost 20 months ago, wide-eyed and determined to carve out something meaningful in an industry obsessed with data dashboards and client churn percentages. Liberty Point wasn't just any consultancy. Based in the towering steel heart of downtown Chicago, perched on the 25th floor of the Liberty Center building. It's one of those places where the coffee costs $5, the views cost $5 million, and the only thing colder than the marble floors is the way people look through you if your numbers don't hit target. But even in a place like this, I believed people mattered. My job title, Client Engagement Strategist, which sounds fancy, but really means I'm the person who calls clients to make sure they're happy, logs every conversation, and tries to keep them from bolting to our competitors. When I first started, my days were a haze of digital forms, metrics reports, and polite small talk that went nowhere. Then I saw the cracks. A string of major clients, big names like Domino Holdings and Vortex Media, quietly slipping away. Frustrated by how robotic everything felt. Emails that read like legal disclaimers. Calls that lasted exactly 15 minutes, timed and recorded. No warmth, no humanity, just transactions. I knew I could do better, so I started listening, really listening. When Caleb Nestor, the CEO of an architecture firm in Philadelphia, casually mentioned his painful divorce, I remembered. Weeks later, when I congratulated him on reconnecting with his ex-wife, he paused, stunned, and signed a contract extension worth $3 million. When Linda Sloane, founder of a rising cosmetics brand in Los Angeles, sighed about missing her daughter's birthday because of a product launch, I made a note. A month later, I arranged for flowers and a gift to be sent to her daughter's school. The following week, Linda renewed her contract and added 2 new services. Those little human touches weren't charity. They were strategy. Not that Colleen saw it that way. She'd walk past my desk, eyes flicking to the screen as if catching me in the act of wasting time. Her voice slicing through the open office floor. Why are you spending nearly an hour on calls that should take 15 minutes? Because 15 minutes doesn't build trust. 15 minutes doesn't make people feel seen. But Colleen didn't care. She only cared about metrics. Cost per client, number of calls per day, how quickly we could close a conversation and move on. And the irony was, the faster we moved on, the faster our clients moved on, too. That's why I kept going, even when my monthly reports triggered red flags, even when whispers started about how Madison's too chatty and not efficient enough. Because I still believe that relationships are the true currency in this business. Until 5 minutes ago, when Colleen called this surprise all-hands meeting, when she dragged me in front of the entire department, when she pulled up my audit report on the massive LED screen and tore it apart piece by piece, when she said my methods were unprofessional and emotionally reckless, and finally, when she pressed delete, 53 pages vanished, as if none of it ever mattered. But standing here, heart hammering so hard I can barely hear over the roar of blood in my ears, I know one thing. Colleen thinks she just eliminated her problem. She has no idea she's about to watch her entire empire crumble, piece by piece, because of the very connections she tried so hard to erase. It didn't start out as a war. Not at first. When I joined Liberty Point, I believed I could fit into the rhythm, that I'd learn the ropes, keep my head down, and still somehow leave my own quiet fingerprint on the place. But you can't stay invisible when you see people drowning, and you're the only one who knows how to throw a rope. I remember my first month on the job. I was assigned a batch of at-risk accounts. Names on a spreadsheet, color-coded in red. I opened the notes for Domino Holdings, a Chicago tech firm, and saw nothing but dry bullet points. Quarterly check-in completed, no new issues reported. But buried in one line was a detail that changed everything. Client mentioned internal leadership conflict. That's not just a footnote. That's a neon sign flashing danger. So I called Marco Vasquez, Domino's COO. Instead of reading off the script, I asked him one question. How's your team holding up after the shakeup? He went silent for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then he exhaled, and he talked about sleepless nights, power struggles, fear that the entire department might get gutted. By the time we hung up, he'd agreed to keep Liberty Point as their analytics partner, provided we could help design a new reporting system to give his exec team real visibility into problem areas. That single conversation salvaged a contract worth nearly $2 million. But when I logged the details, Colleen stormed over to my desk. You spent 49 minutes on one call. Do you understand what that does to your averages? My averages, that's all she saw. My work didn't fit her formulas. It was messy, human. But it was working. The next week, I handled an account called Vortex Media. They'd been cold and distant for months. But then, in a random call, the CFO, Linda Sloane, let it slip that she'd missed her daughter's birthday because of a product launch disaster. That single sentence held more value than any sales pipeline report. So I made a note. 30 days later, I sent flowers and a card to Linda's daughter's school. Nothing flashy, just happy belated birthday. Zoe from the Liberty Point family. 2 days later, Linda renewed their contract, added 2 new services, worth over $1.6 million in new revenue. Colleen didn't celebrate. Instead, she printed my call logs and brought them into a Friday meeting, slapped them on the table like evidence at a trial. Why are you asking clients about their kids, their pets, their personal lives? That's not our business. Our business is analytics and performance optimization. I wanted to scream, because our business wasn't analytics. Our business was trust. But no matter how many times I tried to explain that, Colleen's eyes just turned harder. That's when the rumors started. That I was inefficient, that I was crossing boundaries. People whispered that my style was risky, that it was unsustainable. But every time I thought about toning it down, I remembered the look in Marco's eyes when he realized someone actually cared if his team survived. I remembered the tremble in Linda's voice when she said, "No one's ever done that for me before." Those moments reminded me why I couldn't go back to the cold, sterile way everyone else operated. I was tired of clients feeling like they were just another row in a spreadsheet. So I kept going. I listened to Caleb Nestor, the architect from Philly, as he talked about how lonely he felt after his divorce. I remembered his words. And months later, when he said he'd gotten back together with his ex-wife, I congratulated him. He was stunned, and he signed a new contract. $3 million. But with every win, Colleen grew more suspicious. She started pulling me into one-on-one meetings, closing the door behind her. "You're not here to play therapist," she'd hiss. You're here to process accounts. You're becoming a liability. A liability. I was bringing in millions in retention and new revenue, but because it didn't fit into a spreadsheet, I was dangerous. She hated that I believed relationships were worth more than efficiency. I hated that she believed they weren't. That was the line drawn between us. And whether either of us realized it or not, we were both already standing at the edge of the fight that would burn this entire place to the ground. By the start of my second year at Liberty Point, the air between me and Colleen was electric, crackling with silent accusations, measuring glances, and the knowledge that one of us was going to end up victorious, and the other expendable. At first, I thought maybe I could find middle ground. I tried shortening my calls. I trimmed my follow-up notes. I kept some conversations strictly business, even when I heard that quiet tremor in a client's voice that made me want to ask, "Are you okay?" But the moment I started treating people like transactions, something inside me went cold. The work felt hollow, and the numbers reflected it. Retention rates started slipping, ever so slightly. Clients were polite but distant. The small talk dried up. Colleen noticed immediately. She called me into her office, shut the door, and crossed her arms. Her eyes were sharp enough to draw blood. "So you're finally getting with the program," she said. "Your call times have dropped 15% this month." But I couldn't even look at her without feeling like a fraud. Yes, but I'm losing connections. Clients sound different, less engaged. Her mouth twisted like I'd just confessed to a crime. "That's not your job to worry about. Madison, let sales handle engagement. Your job is efficiency." I left her office trembling. That weekend, I sat alone in my tiny apartment on the north side, staring at the Chicago skyline blazing gold and blue against Lake Michigan. I thought about every client who'd ever told me something personal. About Linda's daughter, about Caleb's divorce, about Marco's fear of getting fired. I realized I couldn't keep pretending to be someone else, because the thing Colleen called a weakness was the only reason I mattered here at all. So I came back Monday morning with new resolve. I went right back to my style. Longer calls, personal notes, remembering birthdays, dogs' names, favorite coffee orders. And within weeks, the metrics rebounded. Retention shot up 37% compared to the previous quarter. Referrals started pouring in from clients I'd never even worked with directly. Revenue estimates began to climb. But that success only put a target on my back. Colleen started watching me like a hawk. She'd appear behind my chair unexpectedly, arms folded, lips pinched. "I saw you logged a 72-minute call with Caleb Nestor yesterday. You're aware that's almost 5 times the target duration." "Right." I tried to keep my voice calm. He was discussing potential expansion into 3 new markets. He needed someone to talk through the challenges. He appreciated having a partner, not just a vendor. Colleen's jaw clenched so tight I thought she might break her own teeth. "You're not his partner. You're a consultant. Remember your place." And the way she said it, your place made my skin crawl. But she didn't stop there. That afternoon, she cornered me in the break room. "Madison, I'm getting feedback from people saying you're overstepping." I blinked. Overstepping how? Making clients feel obligated, digging into personal details that should stay off the table. This is a professional services firm, not a therapy session. The words burned, because I knew the truth. Clients didn't feel obligated. They felt seen, valued. But Colleen wasn't looking for truth. She was building a case. Rumors began swirling across the floor. Whispers that I was unprofessional, that I was creating liabilities for the firm. I'd catch people glancing at me as I walked by, then looking quickly away. One afternoon, I overheard 2 junior analysts at the coffee machine. I heard she's trying to manipulate clients emotionally. That's why Colleen's cracking down. I froze, because I knew exactly who was planting those seeds. Colleen was playing a longer game. She was setting the stage for something bigger, a takedown. And the more my results improved, the more determined she became. Then came the week she called me into her office and dropped the bomb. I want you to compile a full audit of every client interaction you've had in the past 12 months, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Notes, emails, call summaries, every detail. I blinked, heart thudding. That's hundreds of hours of records. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, consider it an opportunity to show the value of your approach. Unless, of course, there's something you don't want us to see. I wanted to slam her office door. Instead, I swallowed hard. Fine, I'll do it. She leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Because we both knew what she was really hoping. That buried somewhere in my meticulous notes. She'd find ammunition, a breach of privacy, an inappropriate comment. Anything to finally justify erasing me from the company I'd spent almost 2 years trying to save. And even as I agreed to her demand, I felt the walls close in. I knew I was heading straight into the fight of my life. But I also knew this. If Colleen wanted to play dirty, I'd show her exactly how powerful the truth could be. I barely slept for 2 weeks. My eyes were raw from staring at spreadsheets. My hands cramped from typing until dawn. But I finished the audit, 53 pages. Every call logged, every email summarized, every piece of personal detail carefully documented not as gossip, but as evidence of how each connection led to actual, measurable business results. It wasn't just about remembering someone's birthday. It was about contracts signed, referrals gained, revenue saved. I printed it out, stacked it neatly, and held it like a shield as I walked into Colleen's office that Monday morning. She looked up, lips curling in a small, triumphant smile. "Excellent! You're just in time." My gut twisted. In time for what? She didn't answer. Instead, she stood, smoothed her tailored blazer, and swept past me into the hallway. "Follow me." She led me to the main conference room. The blinds were open, flooding the space with harsh Chicago sunlight, glinting off the glass towers outside. Inside, 26 people sat waiting. Analysts, managers, senior partners, and Peter Wainwright, the CEO of Liberty Point Consulting, standing at the head of the table, arms crossed, face unreadable. My pulse exploded in my chest. Peter gave me a small nod. "Madison, please take a seat." I lowered myself into a chair. My audit still clutched in my arms. Colleen strode to the front of the room, her heels echoing like gunshots against the polished floor. "Thank you all for joining on such short notice," she began, voice as smooth as polished steel. "Today, we'll be reviewing a rather unique approach one of our team members has been using with client engagements." I felt every pair of eyes swing toward me. Colleen gestured, and the massive LED screen behind her flickered to life. A digital version of my audit appeared. She began scrolling through it, page by page. On screen, my words glowed in bright white text. Caleb shared he's been feeling lonely since the divorce. Wants to discuss expanding into residential design. Linda's daughter, Zoe, turned 8. Client expressed gratitude for birthday gesture, subsequently renewed contract, added services, line after line, each note deeply personal and directly tied to revenue. But Colleen didn't mention the revenue. She kept her voice cold, clinical. "This is precisely the type of boundary crossing we cannot tolerate," she announced. "Personal conversations about divorces, children, private matters. This is not professional communication. This is a breach of client confidentiality and an unacceptable misuse of company time." I opened my mouth to protest, but she cut me off with a sharp glance. "Madison, how do you justify spending 72 minutes on a single client call when our average target is 15? I tried to keep my voice steady, because those conversations lead to loyalty, to contracts, to millions in revenue we would have lost otherwise. Peter cleared his throat. "I'd like to hear about those outcomes." "Madison," Colleen turned on him like a snake. "With respect, Peter, the point here is not revenue. The point is standards. This is not how Liberty Point does business." I felt anger bloom hot in my chest. I stood, My chair scraped the floor. I disagree, I said, voice shaking. Every single client in this report has stayed with us because I cared enough to listen, to remember what matters to them. And those so-called personal details are the reason we've signed over $7 million in new business this past year. Colleen's mouth fell open. Peter raised an eyebrow. 7 million. Yes, I said page 32. I tied every personal connection to tangible business results. It's all right there. I held up the printed audit. Colleen lunged forward and snatched it out of my hand. This entire approach is garbage, she hissed. We're not running a social club. We're a data-driven consultancy. Starting today, we return to efficient professional communication protocols. And as for these files, she turned back to the giant screen. Her finger hovered over a single red icon in the top corner of the document window. Delete all. I felt my breath stop. No, wait. But her finger slammed down, and the screen went blank. 53 pages. A year of my life. Gone. A stunned silence swallowed the room. Peter stared at the empty screen, then at Colleen, then at me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone dropped a pen. It clattered on the table like a gunshot. Colleen took a deep breath, smoothing her blouse as if nothing had happened. Meeting adjourned, she said coolly. We will discuss new client protocols in departmental breakouts later today. She turned and strode out of the room, heels striking sharp as a verdict. I stood there frozen, fingers trembling. Peter hesitated, then quietly murmured, Madison, perhaps we should talk privately. But I couldn't speak, because all I could see was the blank screen. All I could hear was Colleen's voice echoing in my skull. This entire approach is garbage. I gathered my things in silence, trying to ignore the eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine. And in that moment, I thought maybe Colleen had finally won. But fate was already rolling out the next move on the board. And none of us, not even Colleen, saw it coming. I don't remember leaving the conference room. I just remember the hollow sound of my heels on the tile, the blur of fluorescent lights above me, and the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I stumbled into an empty corridor, clutching the edge of a filing cabinet so hard my knuckles turned white. It felt like my lungs had forgotten how to work. Gone. All of it. The late nights, the phone calls, the tiny human details that I'd collected and nurtured like rare flowers. 53 pages reduced to an empty screen. Colleen's voice still rang in my ears. This entire approach is garbage. And I wanted to scream, because it wasn't garbage. It was the foundation under everything Liberty Point claimed to stand for. Client trust, loyalty, human connection. I could still see the faces of the people whose names had filled those pages. Caleb, eyes softening as he told me about reconnecting with his ex-wife. Linda, whispering that she'd cried when the flowers arrived for her daughter. Marco, his voice breaking as he admitted he was terrified his whole department was about to get axed. These weren't just business transactions. They were people, and Colleen had erased them as if they were nothing more than typos on a spreadsheet. Somewhere behind me, the conference room door banged open. People spilled out in hushed clusters, avoiding my eyes. No one said my name. No one asked if I was okay. Because in Colleen's world, you didn't comfort casualties. You just stepped over them and kept moving. I tried to steady my breathing, pressing my palm to the cool metal of the cabinet, but every inhale felt like knives. I kept thinking, maybe if I explained one more time, if I showed Peter the revenue charts, if I printed another copy of the report, but I knew it was pointless. Colleen hadn't destroyed the audit because she thought it was inaccurate. She destroyed it because it proved I was right. Because it proved that treating clients like people wasn't just good manners, it was good business. And Colleen couldn't let that narrative win. Not when it threatened the way she'd built her entire career. A flicker of movement pulled me out of my spiral. Peter stood at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, his brow furrowed in a way that made him look 20 years older. He hesitated, like he wanted to approach me. But in the end, he just gave me a small, helpless shrug and turned away. And that was the moment I realized I was alone. Truly, utterly alone. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. I felt like my body weighed 1,000 pounds, like my bones were sinking into the floor. Somewhere, deep down, a tiny voice whispered that maybe this was it. Maybe Colleen had finally crushed me for good. But as I stared at the blank wall in front of me, a new thought sparked in the darkness. Colleen might have deleted my files, but she couldn't delete the people. She couldn't delete the relationships I'd built. Those existed outside the four walls of Liberty Point, carried in conversations, in trust, in loyalty that no one, not even Colleen Brewster, could control. Another buzz from my phone. Persistent. I blinked, wiping my eyes, and pulled it out of my bag. Unknown number. New York area code. For a second, I thought about sending it to voicemail. But some instinct made me swipe the green icon. A crisp male voice came on the line. Madison Drake. This is Liam Matthews, partner at Newbridge Strategies. My lips parted, but no sound came out. He continued, his tone warm, confident, like he was offering me a lifeline. We've been watching what's happening over at Liberty Point, and we'd very much like to talk. And right then, something shifted in my chest. The despair, the rage, the exhaustion, all of it began melting into a single, sharp, unstoppable thought. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. For a heartbeat, I couldn't even process what I'd heard. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, as if that might make Liam's voice make more sense. He spoke again, gentle but firm. Madison, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I let out a dry, almost hysterical laugh. I just watched my entire career get deleted in front of my colleagues. So, yeah. Perfect timing. There was a pause on his end. Then, a quiet chuckle. That's exactly why I'm calling. I blinked, pushing back the hair that had fallen into my eyes. Who, exactly, are you? Liam Matthews. I'm a partner at Newbridge Strategies. We're a boutique consultancy based out of Manhattan. We specialize in high-touch client engagement for complex industries, healthcare, finance, tech. I've been following your work for a while now. Madison, I frowned. Following me? How? We track retention numbers across the industry. Liberty Point's client stick rate jumped 37% after you joined. We also hear things. Stories about how you remember details no one else does. How clients light up when you're the one calling. I swallowed, throat suddenly dry. You're telling me you called because you... like my style? I'm telling you, Liam said, that the future of consulting isn't efficiency, it's connection. And I think you're about to become the proof of that. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. He let me sit in the silence a moment. Then, in a voice low and precise, he said the words that flipped my entire world upside down. We'd like to offer you a position. Madison, senior partner. Total comp package of $550,000 annually, plus equity stake, full creative control over client engagement strategy. No micromanaging, no quotas on call lengths, just results. Real results. I felt my knees buckle and I braced a hand against the wall. I can't bring any Liberty Point data with me. I can't betray clients' privacy. Of course not, Liam said smoothly. We'd never ask that. But let's be honest, data isn't what makes clients loyal. People are. If your clients choose to follow you because they trust you more than they trust Liberty Point, well, that's not stealing. That's freedom of choice. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. The idea was wild, impossible. But as I stared at my own reflection in the dark glass window across the hallway, I saw someone I hadn't seen in months. A fighter. Why now? I asked softly. Liam didn't hesitate. Because we've been waiting for the perfect moment. And Colleen Brewster just handed it to us on a silver platter. You've got every big account at Liberty Point wondering what the hell just happened. Clients talk. Madison. Word is spreading fast. My mind flashed through faces. Caleb, Linda, Marco, all the people who trusted me more than any CRM system ever could. I felt a trembling laugh rise in my chest. Liam, are you saying you want me to help you poach Liberty Point's clients? Not poach, he corrected, his voice silky. Just answer the phone when they inevitably call you, because they will. I felt the pieces slot into place. My entire career hadn't died back in that conference room. It was being reborn. I straightened, squaring my shoulders. What do you want me to do next? Liam chuckled softly. I want you to breathe. And then I want you to think about what it would feel like to work in a place where nobody punishes you for being human. He paused. And Madison, one more thing. I know you've just been through hell. But trust me, this is the start of the best revenge story you'll ever tell. When the call ended, I lowered the phone and stared out the window. The city glowed beneath me, cold steel and golden light. A fresh breeze rattled the blinds. And for the first time all day, I felt something powerful bloom in my chest. Hope. Colleen thought she'd buried me, but she just lit the fuse that was about to blow her entire empire apart. The next morning, I walked into Liberty Point's lobby, feeling like I'd shed my skin overnight. My hair was pulled back tight. My suit was sharp enough to cut glass. But the biggest change wasn't on the outside. It was the calm burning inside me. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I headed straight for the elevators, rode up in silence, and stepped into the office to find people gathered in hushed circles. They fell quiet when they saw me. I could almost taste the tension in the air. I crossed the floor and saw Colleen standing by the coffee machine, speaking in rapid, clipped tones to Peter Wainwright. Her eyes landed on me, and a flicker of something crossed her face. Surprise, maybe, or worry. I didn't give her time to speak. Peter, I said, voice steady. Can I have a word in the conference room? Colleen opened her mouth to protest, but Peter nodded quickly. Of course. We stepped inside. I closed the door behind us. My heart pounded, but my voice was clear. I'm resigning, effective immediately. Peter's eyes went wide. Madison, wait. Let's not rush. We can work through this. Colleen barked a short, bitter laugh. You can't just walk out. Madison, there are protocols. Notice periods. Transition plans. I turned to her, feeling a strange, icy calm. My contract allows immediate resignation in the event of a hostile work environment. Having my entire year's work deleted and being publicly humiliated qualifies. Peter opened his mouth again, but I held up my hand. I've accepted an offer from Newbridge Strategies. Senior partner. They value what I do. They value the human side of this business. Colleen's face drained of color. You're throwing your career away for a startup with no track record, she snapped, and what you're planning to steal our clients. I tilted my head. I don't have to steal anyone. Colleen, relationships aren't property. People decide who they want to trust. And you just gave every one of our clients a reason to rethink that trust. Peter let out a slow, shaky breath. Madison, please, just give us a chance to fix this. But it was already too late. Because as I spoke, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. Another unknown number. Another client. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. I left the conference room without looking back. I packed up my desk. People stood silently as I gathered my things. Some of them looked ashamed. Others looked inspired. And a few looked like they were wondering if they should follow me out the door. The moment I stepped into the elevator, I felt the weight drop off my shoulders. But that was just the beginning. 3 days into my new job at Newbridge, the calls started. First it was Caleb. Madison, he said, voice crackling over the line. I heard what happened. I can't work with people who think relationships are a waste of time. Tell me about Newbridge. By the end of that call, he'd set up a meeting to transition his business. $2 million. Gone from Liberty Point in one phone call. Then Linda called. I don't want to work with people who see me as a number, she said. Are you free next week? And then Marco and others. Within my first month at Newbridge, 14 clients either signed over contracts or started discussions to do so. Over 60% of Liberty Point's annual revenue evaporating like steam, all because Colleen thought human connection was inefficient. Meanwhile, back at Liberty Point, the place was imploding. I started hearing stories from mutual contacts, Colleen trying to reach out to clients, only to be met with polite refusals. Peter calling emergency board meetings, desperate to stop the bleeding. Layoff rumors rippled through the staff. Colleen tried to blame me for poaching, but there was no evidence, because I wasn't recruiting anyone. I was just answering the phone, and each time, the conversation started the same way. I trust you. I want to keep working with you. That's the part Colleen never understood. Clients weren't loyal to a brand. They were loyal to people. One afternoon, Liam leaned against my new office door, grinning. You know, Madison, we thought bringing you on would be good for business. We didn't know it would be this good. I grinned back. I'm not finished yet. Because revenge wasn't about tearing Colleen down. It was about building something better and proving, beyond any doubt, that relationships weren't weaknesses. They were the strongest leverage you could ever hold. 6 months after the day Colleen hit delete, I stood in a sunlit auditorium in Midtown Manhattan, my heart pounding as the red TEDx letters glowed behind me. Rows of people leaned forward, eyes fixed on me, waiting for the story they'd all come to hear. I took a breath, the microphone cool in my hand, and I said, sometimes the numbers don't tell the whole truth. Sometimes the most valuable asset a company has can't be measured in spreadsheets. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. I went on, voice growing stronger with each word. I spent nearly 2 years in a place where I was told that efficiency mattered more than empathy, that personal conversations were distractions, that loyalty came from contracts, not connections. And then, one day, a single click erased everything I'd built. People were hanging on every syllable, but what no one understood is that you can delete data, but you can't delete relationships. A round of quiet applause broke out. I told them about Caleb, about Linda, about the dozens of people who called me, not because of a corporate brand, but because they trusted me. And I watched as heads nodded, eyes shining with recognition. Because everyone in that room had felt it at some point, that difference between being a line item and being a human being. When I finished, the applause thundered like a wave crashing over the stage. Afterward, strangers approached me. An executive whispered, "I've been afraid to let my team connect like that. You made me rethink everything." A young woman with tears in her eyes said, "My boss calls me too emotional. Now I know it's my superpower." And right then, I realized my story wasn't just revenge. It was a roadmap for every person who's ever been told that caring too much is a weakness. Back at Newbridge, things were thriving. I'd been named senior partner, with a growing team under me. Our client roster had exploded. Not because we undercut prices, but because people followed the person who remembered their dog's surgery, or their kid's piano recital, or the anniversary of a business they built from nothing. And Liberty Point, they'd collapsed into chaos. Peter tried to stabilize things, but too many clients were gone. Layoffs hit hard, office floors went dark, and Colleen, she was quietly let go during a strategic restructuring. Word on the street was she'd been interviewing, but no firm wanted to touch her after her name became tied to one of the biggest client retention disasters in the consulting industry. I didn't feel triumphant hearing that. I felt free, because my revenge wasn't about watching Colleen fail. It was about proving that kindness wasn't a liability. It was leverage. And the beautiful irony was that Colleen herself had created the very circumstances of her own downfall. In destroying my work, she exposed the truth. That loyalty doesn't live in databases. It lives in the moments when you remember someone's child's name, or the crisis they barely spoke aloud, or the quiet hope they shared with you because they trusted you not to exploit it. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been told that you're too emotional, that you care too much, I want you to remember this. Those are not your flaws. They're your secret weapons. Because one day, you might be the reason a client stays, or the reason someone believes in themselves again, or the reason an entire company thrives. And if someone tries to delete your worth, let them, because you can always rebuild. Stronger, brighter, and absolutely unstoppable.